All right, welcome back to the show, everyone. Good to have you here. In today's episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to list the top 50 cities and towns across the UK with the highest Islamic population. Now, one of the facts that circulates widely is that only 6% of the UK population is Islamic. Therefore, all of this hysteria over mass migration and the grooming gangs is really just a far-right conspiracy theory. Nothing to see here, folks. Please move on. But what I'm going to do is show you that actually, when you look at some of the biggest towns and cities across the UK, it tells a very different story. So let's get into it. Starting off with number one, we have the district in London called Tower Hamlets. This is slap bang in the center of London, really. And what we're seeing there is a 40% Islamic population. 40% of this huge district in London is Islamic. Okay, just bear that in mind for just a second as we continue the rest of these towns and cities and areas. Blackburn with Darwin, 35% Islamic. Newham, almost 35% as well. Luton, 32.9%, almost 33%. This is where Tommy Robinson is from. Redbridge is 31.3%. Bradford is 30.5%. Now, as I go through this list, you may recognize some of these towns and cities. Perhaps you've heard Tommy Robinson talk about it, or perhaps it's been in the media, or Rupert Lowe has talked about it. We've just had the grooming gang inquiry just come out. And so you'll see a correlation here. But you don't actually need a very high population of Islamism in your region to start seeing these problems. In fact, some of the places which have seen terrible stories of grooming gangs have actually come from towns and cities with a very small percentage of an Islamic population. But let's continue. Birmingham, overall, 29.9%, almost 30%. And of course, if you break that down into certain areas of Birmingham, you're going to see that percentage skyrocket even more. In Slough, it's 29.4%. Pendle, almost 26%. Oldham, 24.5%. Barking and Dagenham, 24.5%. High Wycombe, 24%. Leicester, 23.5%. We go over to Waltham Forest, 21%. Brent, 20%. Westminster, as in the centre of the political hub for the UK, 20%. Bolton, 19%. Croydon, 19%. Kirklees, 19%. If you look at Enfield, it's 18%. Hackney in London, 18%. Rochdale, right? You've heard of the Rochdale grooming gangs? That's 18% there. Haringey, I've never heard of that, but it's called Haringey apparently. 17%. Manchester, 17%. Again, if you zoom into Manchester and you look at certain areas, that population will be a lot higher. Ealing, 17%. Preston, 15%. Harrow, 15%. Accrington, 15%. Barnet, 15%. Woking, 15%. Woking. Let's go over to Sandwell, that's 15%. Hounslow, 13 to 15%. Peterborough, 15%. Lambeth, 13%. Camden, 10%. Camden's like the alternative LGBT little pocket of London and it is now 10% Muslim. Oxford, 10%. Wolverhampton, 11.5%. Merton, 11%. Southwark, 11%. Reading, 11%. Burnley, 10%. Nottingham, 10%. Wandsworth, 10%. Milton Keynes, 10%. Now, this is shocking. And to think that people still have this picture that it's only 6% of the population. First of all, that number comes from 2020. That's 6 years ago now. And we have seen hundreds of thousands, I think, pour in at least over that period of time, plus the numbers that are here illegally. And I don't think it gives an accurate representation of the feel, the aesthetic changes, the demographic changes of these major areas across the UK. London, Birmingham, Manchester, these are the control centres, the economic centres, the political centres of the UK. Once upon a time, if you're going to invade a country, displace and ethnically cleanse the population, it really doesn't take a heck of a lot of people to do this. And you don't have to cover every square inch of the country. You just have to control the centers. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And so I thought it was important to make this video just as a resource for you guys, to share it on Facebook, to share it on WhatsApp, and on Instagram. Please get this video message out. Perhaps you have relatives in the UK, friends, people that are still out of the loop of what's going on. And look, it's not racist to talk about this. And I'm telling you that I myself, my father is Iranian and lives in the UK and has done for like the last nearly, 35, 40 years, never committed a crime, hardworking, absolute slave to the economy. He's not a Muslim, but what I'm trying to say is like not every person that's a migrant and not born from the UK is inherently a problem. Sensible migration can be a great thing. What we're dealing with is not sensible migration at all, not a single bit. And the problem especially arises when the people we're talking about here, they're not coming from Japan, where you've got a benevolent kind of culture and ideology. We're not talking about people from other parts of Europe, again, that share more or less the same kind of cultural beliefs and attitudes. We are talking about a population of people whose religious texts and edicts and dogma say that the non-Muslims are the worst of all creatures, that you should strike their necks, that you should slaughter them, that you should chop off their hands, that you should kill them, that they're the infidels, they're the kafirs, they are worthless, you should burn down their churches, like what's theirs is yours. You have Islamic scholars teaching Islamic men that to sexually molest, and exploit non-Muslim, white, European Christian girls is essentially a duty, that they deserve the humiliation. This is the reality of Islam that the mainstream media and our governments don't want to talk about because it's uncomfortable. But that's why all of our airports have such high security, right? It's not because of the Christians, it's not because of the Buddhists or the Hindus, it's because of the Islamic threat. We have 40,000 jihadists living in the UK that MI5 knows about. They're monitoring them, and the threat level is huge. This is why we have all these security checkpoints and bollards and anti-terror devices across the city, outside of buildings, outside of galleries. Christmas markets are now essentially like, high security prisons. You can't call them Christmas markets. We have to call them festive winter markets. The display of Christianity has been, displaced, and we're not honoring that. We're not celebrating those cultural practices and traditions. And now we're bending over backwards in the West to celebrate Eid and Ramadan and these kinds of things. We're seeing more and more politicians in the UK and mayors and council members, being outright Muslim and expressing that they want Sharia law in the UK. At some point, if you are still in denial of this, you must wake up and study history and know that what we're experiencing now in Europe, in the UK, is way worse and way more sneaky than basically the tactics that were being used during the conquering of Christendom by the Ottomans, by the Islamic forces, these caliphates, that at least you knew outright that they were invading you. They showed up with their army. We're declaring war. We're going to take over. Now it's under the guise of secular language, in multiculturalism, open borders, human rights, and so the West is naive to this now. We are not reading the writing on the wall. We are incredibly naive, and the Islamists, ISIS, Al Qaeda, Al Shabaab, Boko Haram, the Fulani, the IRGC, they all know how naive the West are. They all know this. The Muslim Brotherhood is exploiting this naivety. And so they are getting into Europe very, very easily, just hopping on a boat, claiming that you're a refugee, and boom, you can create sleeper cells all across Europe. This is a major national security threat. This is a major civilisational threat. And I can't think of much more that is of higher importance to the protection of future generations than dealing and solving this problem. So anyway, please share this video on, subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and stay tuned for some upcoming videos. God bless.